Welcome to The Old Man and the Three with JJ Redick and Tommy Alter, presented by Cash App and brought to you by 342 Productions. This is episode 88, Pascal Siakam. Tommy, what a fascinating guy, what a fascinating player, what a fascinating backstory. We get into all of it with Pascal. He's an awesome guest. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah, he's definitely up there for craziest rises and backstories getting to the NBA, much less to a second-team All-NBA player, which is we get to in the interview, but it's amazing that he's reached that peak from where he started.
The best breakdown I can give of that is the guy was second-team All-NBA about 7 or 8 years after he got introduced to the game. That's pretty wild to me. And we get into all of that with Pascal. Quick announcement. We are going to push our live show in South Florida on December 7th due to a scheduling conflict. The two guests that we had lined up are now unable to make the show, and this was a very tough decision for us to make. But one of the things that Tommy and I try to do as best we can is we try to honor our audience, and you guys have been amazing in the last 14 or 15 months with this show. The Brooklyn crowd that we had in September for our first live show was amazing. We brought amazing guests, and we want to honor you guys for taking time, booking a ticket, spending your money, and we want to give you the best show possible. So we are going to do a show in South Florida. We're going to do it later in early in 2022, and we promise we will have some awesome guests for you guys. But we felt like you just didn't want to hear us talk with just Duncan and Davis.
No, our first Miami show, we need to bring the heat.
Yes.
No pun intended.
There you go. One other thing, if you do want a refund for your tickets, you can get a refund point of sale from the browardcenter.org where you booked your tickets. No problem. Tommy, I thought we could spend a little bit of time giving some love to some overlooked teams and players that maybe aren't getting as much chatter about them in the national media. So I thought we could talk specifically about 4 teams: the Knicks, the Nets, the Lakers, and the Warriors.
I would love to talk about those teams. I feel like if there's any place people come to, any show people come to have that conversation, it's ours.
I'm only kidding. Tommy, the Bucks are on an 8-game winning streak right now. Counting the previous 2 games, I believe they're now 10-0 when Chris, Giannis, and Drew all play.
You deserve, by the way, you deserve credit for pointing that out. I think 2 shows ago, on this. 2 or 3 shows ago, you pointed out that connection, and no one else had mentioned it. I think at that point they were either 2-0 or 3-0 or something like that, and they still haven't lost.
They're still missing Brook. DiVincenzo is still out. I'm thoroughly enjoying the Giannis show right now. He's 3rd in the league in points, 6th in rebounds. I looked this up today. He's always averaged at around a little bit over 5 assists a game. He's averaging this year a career high 6 assists a game. He's 20th in the league in assists. He's such a willing passer, and I love the action they're running with him and Grayson Allen, him and Pat Connaughton. Both those guys are having career years. Grayson Allen's at 43% from 3. Pat Connaughton's at 42% from 3. A few weeks ago, the East felt like it was wide open. And then a bunch of things happened. The Nets have been erratic at times. They're still obviously right up there as contenders. Joel gets sick. Philly now sits in 11th in the East. My question to you is, do the Bucks look like the prohibitive favorite in the East once again?
They're the favorite. I don't know about prohibitive.
And why do you say that?
Well, first of all, like you just mentioned, a lot can change in 2 weeks. You know,
that's true.
A lot can change in 2 weeks.
Let's assume bodies are able to play. So anybody that's not injured is able to play in the playoffs.
I'll just say that the Nets have 2 of the great players of all time on their team. When you have that, it's really hard to to count them out in any discussion. And then the Heat are another team that has not been at full strength all year, and they just had
100% agree on both those teams.
Yeah, Bam just went down, so he's going to be out for a little bit. But it's December 2nd.
We're a quarter way through the season. I
do think your point though about the Bucks in general, from a sort of public perspective, is valid, and that nobody seems to, and people did this last year too, and then they fuck around and win a championship. No one really talks about them, and they just keep winning. I was going to mention to you, so our friends at FanDuel, they're doing the finals futures right now. The Bucks are plus 700 to win a championship, which is only behind the Nets and the Warriors. Warriors are first, Nets are second. So it does feel like there are some people that are acknowledging this.
Yes.
Are acknowledging this. But I mean, I guess my sort of secondary question to you about the Bucks specifically, and you mentioned some of the things that have gone well, is do you feel like they're like, is Dante going to come back and make a big difference? Obviously, we know what Brook can do when he's healthy, but are we basically looking at this team in its sort of fully fleshed out, piece? Because I think with Miami and Brooklyn, there's definitely going to be some additions over the next couple of months.
How I look at the Bucks is how I look at any great basketball team. The Bucks have flexibility. They have flexibility in their roster. And so what the absence of Brook Lopez and DiVincenzo has done, it has given a bigger role to Grayson Allen, a bigger role to Pat Connaughton. It has given a bigger role to Bobby Portis, who's also been really good and who was really good at times last year in their championship run. And so I think this team is built to win in the playoffs because they have flexibility on their roster and they can play different ways. I mean, we talked about this last summer. Bryn Forbes was a monster in the first round. That was a great matchup for him against the Miami Heat. He had some huge games in that series, and then he had a bunch of DNPs.
Yeah.
And so that's what the beauty of that roster on the Bucks does. They have such flexibility, and that's ultimately what is going to win in the playoffs. And as we discussed last year a ton, from the Brooklyn series on, Bud was willing to make major adjustments game to game, series to series. It's a big reason they won. So I look at the East, Tommy. Go ahead, Tommy.
I have one other question. What is Giannis missing? Is there anything that at this point he can get better at? Because I was watching that Charlotte game the other night.
Amazing game.
Amazing game. Amazing performance. And to your point, I mean, the guy is at another level right now from, really all of his peers.
It's clearly the 3-point shot. I don't think he needs to add a consistent mid-range jumper. It's clearly the 3-point shot. I think it will open up so much. I mean, the fact that he's willing to take, we talk about this sometimes with Ben Simmons. The fact that he's at least willing to take the shots is a huge thing as well. So when I look at the East, there's 5 teams to me. This new playoff play-in game that got introduced during the bubble and got expanded last year. There's 6 teams that are automatically in the playoffs. And I look at the East, and despite the 76ers being in 11th right now, I look at the East and I think there's 5 teams that will definitely be in those 6 spots, playoff guaranteed, and that's the Nets, the Bucks, the Bulls, the Heat, and the 76ers. And so the East for that 6th seed feels really wide open. And one of the teams that got off to another slow start, just like last year, is the Hawks. And over their last 10 games, they're 8-2. Over the last 10, Clint Capella's going for 14 and 14 a game. And lo and behold, all that chatter at the beginning of the season about the new foul rules and Trae Young not being able to score the basketball. He's at 26-9. He's 7th in the league in player efficiency rating.
He's gone for 30 like the last 5 games.
Yeah. He's 4th in scoring and 3rd in assists in the league. He's having another all-NBA season. They're a really, really interesting team. The other team they're tied with right now for 6th place is the Cavs, who I think have sort of exceeded expectation. They're on a 3-game winning streak. Jared Allen, you could make an argument, is having... Actually, you can make a pretty fairly strong case that he's having the best season of anyone involved in the James Harden trade. That may be a hot take.
I don't even think it's a hot take. It's just a take that feels crazy to hear.
It feels crazy to hear, but it's probably true.
Yes.
Relative to
yes,
expectation, all that. Clearly, James Harden is the centerpiece of that trade. MVP, all that stuff. James Harden's a fantastic player, top 10 player in the league, all that stuff. But Jared Allen's having an unbelievable season. Do you think they've I don't know that they've overachieved to this point. They've played good basketball. Do you think that they're a legitimate 6th seed contender?
Yes. And first of all, we need to shout out our boy Kevin Love.
Yes.
Balling last night. He's shooting the shit out of the ball. Evan Mobley is probably the rookie of the year if the season ended today. Which I think everybody knew he was going to be good.
He's so good.
Where he was picked, but like his vision is amazing. Defensively, he basically he's a game changer right now. What is he, 20 years old? My question for you about the Cavs in particular is, there's actually the first question is how did a team, a championship contending team, not pick up Rubio? It feels like Rubio wins everywhere he goes.
It's a great question, and he's a guy, and not to be Debbie Downer, but he's a guy that if Cleveland does take a little bit of a nosedive, could be a great pickup as a backup point guard for a championship contender team. Obviously, with his salary, it makes trades a little bit prohibitive at the deadline, but he's been fantastic this year. And you're right, he's a winner. He just makes winning basketball plays. He's had some great shooting nights, including in MSG against the Knicks. The East is really fascinating to me. It's really fascinating because I'm looking at the standings right now. We talked about the Hawks and the Cavs, obviously. Boston's playing better basketball. Charlotte is one of the most entertaining teams in the league. The Knicks, again, I think they overachieved last year, but you certainly have to consider them a candidate for that 6th spot.
Did you mention Washington in that 6?
I didn't.
So what do you think about? I mean, we have to. That has to be in the conversation for right now.
Oh, they're certainly. Yeah, I mean, look, they're 14-8. They're tied for 2nd. This is no hate or shade against them.
Yeah,
maybe I'm just not a believer at this point that they're a top 5 team in the East. So they're certainly going to be in the running for the 6th. Obviously, they're sitting in the pole position for a playoff spot right now.
But I guess the point, and my question for you would just be, with the exception of Detroit, who clearly is still in their rebuilding phase.
Orlando,
it doesn't seem like there are any other. Doesn't seem like there are any other teams that seem to think that they are rebuilding right now. Everybody seems to think they have a shot.
Pacers, Raptors. We were just in Toronto, obviously, with Siakam and with Nick Nurse.
And the Raptors have arguably the runner-up to Rookie of the Year. Maybe you can make the argument that Scotty's probably 1A with Mobley right now in that race.
What are the playoff odds right now for the Hawks and Cavs? Do you have that in front of you?
So the FanDuel odds, the Cavs are plus 440, and the Hawks are minus 290, which is not particularly surprising.
Yeah, I think I like the Hawks to make the playoffs, and again, we talk about. I was with our guy Pablo on ESPN Daily podcast today, and I talked with sort of about the orbit of the basketball world. And within a team, there's an orbit, and within a division, within a conference, there's an orbit, and there's certainly an orbit around Trae Young. He is the center of that team, and he's as good as a guard as anyone in basketball. And so, in the NBA, stars matter, and to me, I think the Hawks end up being one of the 6 teams in the Eastern Conference. It's going to be interesting. Obviously, we're only a quarter of the way through the season. It's going to be interesting where Philly ends up, and to your point, it will be really interesting where Washington ends up. And maybe this first quarter was not a fluke, and maybe I will look like a complete jackass 3 months from now, 4 months from now, when they're still sitting as a top 4 seed in the East.
Yeah.
We got to shout out one Western Conference team, Timberwolves, 7-3 in their last 10. They had a 6-game losing streak early in the year, but they had a 5-game winning streak in their last 10. There's a couple really surprising stats about them. And the reason I say they're surprising is because of the narrative surrounding certain players on their team. And one is that they're eighth. They're a top 10 defense. They're eighth so far in the league in defense. And one of the narratives is that Karl-Anthony Towns can't anchor a top 10 defense. You certainly have to give him credit for being engaged on that side of the ball. You have to give credit to Chris Finch and his staff. The other really interesting stat, D'Angelo Russell right now has a 9.8 net rating when he's on the court. His defensive rating is 97.8. D'Angelo Russell's defensive rating. That means when he's on the floor, the Timberwolves, in the 20 games he's played, have had the best defense in the league. So you certainly have to give those two guys a ton of credit on that side of the basketball.
D'Angelo's also, he's scoring 18 a game, and he's playing really efficiently.
Yes. Just a ton of credit to both those guys. What's their playoff odds?
They're plus 124 right now. My question for you about them is, do you think that's a team, it may be a little early for this, but probably not that early. Is that a team that should be looking to make a deal that is like one piece away from making the playoffs, or from making the playoffs and actually like making a run?
Yeah, I think they could potentially add, a veteran or a nice pickup, a guy on a second or third contract, and be in that conversation for a guaranteed spot in the playoffs. I mean, looking at the Western Conference, there's certainly been some teams that have probably, I would say, disappointing, and some of that, of course, is due to injury. Kawhi being out with the Clippers, you can't necessarily fault them for being 500 right now. Denver, who's still missing Jamal Murray. Jokic is having another MVP season, actually an historic advanced stats season. Give that guy all the credit in the world. But to me, it's like Phoenix, Golden State, Utah look really good. They look really good. After that, every spot is up for grabs 4 through 10. And those teams sitting there, there's going to be so much movement throughout the season between those spots.
I have one specific Timberwolves question before we move on. Can
we get Anthony Edwards on the pod? Is that the question?
Well, there's that. We got to have him. We got to have D'Angelo back. We got to have all those guys. But that's not that. My question for you is that, speaking of Anthony Edwards, that dunk against Miami the other night, one of the best in-game dunks probably of the last 5 or 10 years, I'd say. If you're the ref, I don't know who the ref was, do you swallow your whistle whether or not it's a charge when that kind of thing happens?
Man, I don't know that you swallow your whistle. You make the call that you see. Again, there's, it's bang, bang. It was so bang, bang. He's anticipating. He thought the guy was in position. Did they review it? I only saw the highlight like 25 times, but did they actually end up reviewing it?
I don't think so. I think at the point of the game it was at, it didn't really matter. It was more just people were stunned regardless. It wasn't like it was like those 2 points were going to make a difference. The photos are crazy of it.
I mean, how many times do you think we're going to say over the next, let's say 5 years, 7 years, when he's at his athletic peak, that he just did the dunk of the year or the dunk of the last 5 years?
Many times.
There's a ferociousness to which he attacks the rim that
He's a football player.
I'm in awe.
You could tell he's a linebacker. That I guess part of why I wanted to ask you this question was I feel like this steps on or adds to the conversation we had about if you cross somebody over and you don't hit the shot, does it count?
Ooh.
Like if you dunk on somebody
yes.
like that and it doesn't count, does the dunk actually have the same amount of weight?
He did make the dunk. So it's not the same as Ja leaping over Kevin Love and missing the dunk. Man, it's sort of like if you turn in a term paper and the professor gives you partial credit, but you don't get full credit. I'm going to give him partial credit. I'm going to give him
partial credit you could possibly get.
Yes.
Does it the potential to be the best paper ever, but there's one flaw?
Yeah.
You turned it in late.
You turned it in late. Oh, man. That's great. You didn't actually answer the point of the paper. I don't know. There's some disqualifying. Yeah, there's some disqualifying factor here. As we say every episode, if you want to go play around on FanDuel's app, it's easy to use. You must be 21 or over. Age and location restrictions apply. You can see the full terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. I'm glad we had this conversation, Tommy. You know why? Because there's 30 teams in the NBA, and there's a lot of awesome stuff happening around the league. And I think we should make it a goal of this podcast to highlight everything happening in the NBA as much as we can. And one of those things, hey, we're going to have a Toronto Raptors player on the pod this week. And I think we should get to our conversation with one of one, Pascal Siakam.